So okay, what we're using here is the beta version. I don't know if any of you have this already, but you're able to download it. It actually puts a blue icon on your desktop with the blue lettering as opposed to the red. So the beta version is called 15.2, and we've added some things, changed some things. You can always get to the list of changes and improvements we've made on our website, and so I like to use the latest things. So we're probably going to release the full 15.2 soon. So I don't know what just happened to my screen here. Hang on one second. Okay, so we're using the 15.2 beta. It's got some improvements. We'll be releasing the full official version within the next month. And like I say, our website will have a list of all the improvements. So this webinar is going to talk about the framing systems, and specifically when we click on our framing systems link over in the menu, we get our list of frames. We're going to be using the TrueLight glass and aluminum catalog. And if you're not familiar with TrueLight, they are a new company that was formed by combining Vitro America and Arch Aluminum. And they're actually a very avid fan of GDS, and they use it internally, and they do a good job keeping their catalog up to date. So the first, or this webinar is going to specifically talk about, I'm just going to edit this first 1/4-inch storefront system, 1 3/4 by 4. And you don't necessarily have to be in the same thing on your end. You can just kind of follow along with what I'm doing. And I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it better. Now, and sometimes I'll notice things that shouldn't be done a certain way, and I'll have to tell the manufacturer to fix it, but we'll work on it with them. So okay, this screen, the first top half of this screen, or top portion, is frame description. That's obviously important because that shows up in the list. It helps you find the frame that you're looking for, and it's hopefully a way of telling you what you're looking at. Now you can always change that description, modify it just by clicking in here and editing this. One of the things you can do is actually change that description so that it resorts your list. Right now it's sorted on favorites behind me here, but I can sort it on description, and that way whatever you name the frame will, determine the way it's sorted. So if you wanted it always to come up, on the first one on the list, you could actually put an A here. If I put an A in front of that and maybe a dash or something, this is going to be the first one that comes up in the list. Same thing if I name it with a number. You can basically alter the way it's ordered. Now the favorites thing was added later on so that you can actually, and that's why I just make this a favorite is here. You can actually put a check in the box, and anything that's checked, if I sort it by favorites, will appear at the top of the list. So that way you don't have to change the description. So there's a few different ways you can prioritize your list of frames. So all this is just helping you find the frames that you normally use or like to use a lot. And so things like screw spline, the frame type, it's got this list of frame types here. If I change that, this actually affects the labor calculations, and that's why it says used in labor calcs. Because the labor is partly determined by the type of frame the glass is getting glazed in. So it affects basically the glazing labor as well as how the frame's assembled, which affects the man hours and time. So something like the system profile and the glass thickness, those are meant more for helping you find the frame in the list. If it's a list of 300-400 frames, you kind of need ways to narrow down that list of frames. And if you remember from our other webinars or other training videos, this filter bar is very helpful for typing in criteria to help narrow down that list of frames or whatever list you're looking at. So now, same thing goes with glass position. It helps you kind of look, focus on and look at what you're looking for, or find what you're looking for. Glass position, glass thickness, glazing method, all those things. So none of that, with the exception of glass thickness, is really affecting anything in the program. It's just helping you find the frame. A lot of our frames will have a web address, and if you click on that link, it'll take you to a certain web page for that manufacturer. And I'll work with TrueLight since they're going to be updating their catalog soon. We'll try and get the web address in there for all the different frames. So that way, if you wanted to go to their website, it'll take you right to it, to that frame, and you can see, more specifications or particulars for that frame directly at their website. A lot of manufacturers will put notes, like it says here, not included. Now, this is an older carryover note, I think, from version 14, so I would ignore that. Screw spline joinery is kind of obvious because we already have that set as the frame type. Now, a lot of these things we can actually, when we get into the stock material tab, we can look at a detailed drawing, and it'll help us really verify what we're looking at, because whatever parts, we should have a detailed picture of it. I'll just jump to that real quick so you see. So all these different details, if we were to view them, I would actually see a shape, and that will help me determine that I'm looking at the right part. And that's something that I'm going to have another webinar that covers this whole tab. But basically that's a quick, so we can verify that we're looking at a CG 400-7, and it's a center glazed quarter-inch glass extrusion, so we can kind of verify that, okay, this is the system, this is the part we're looking at. So a lot of those things, this whole parts, frame parts window has a lot of information, a lot of power in those areas. And so the glass thickness, if there's no labor code, this basically just helps. So in the glass table that we covered in the last webinar, it actually determines more how that labor is getting calculated for glazing. So here it's just helping you know that you're looking at a quarter-inch glass system, which a lot of times that's in the description. So now another very important section here is the profiles. So this is really the only way the program knows to draw an 1 3/4 member on the screen. Oh, and I forgot to mention here, this system depth is a new thing. We added a little 3D kind of mock-up 3D kind of feature a while ago, and I think we might have removed it actually, so I should probably not mention that much anymore. We had it on this screen. If you have the older with the red icon, I can actually run these both at the same time and log in. So I can run the beta and the regular 15.1 version at the same time. Don't recommend using the same catalog at the same time because it might step on itself. But I can just do it real quick. So see, we had a Make 3D File button, and what it was using that depth of the frame to try and do a mock 3D where it would let you click on it and spin it around. It wasn't that useful to anybody, so we kind of thought, let's just take it out. We did add another feature that, like this show border feature, is something that we added. So we tried to throw a little border for shop drawings on the screen, and that'll print that way when you print it to a piece of paper. So we added that instead of 3D. We thought that was a little more useful. And the border can have information that's taken from the markup report, and or no, actually the cover page, which is over here. Anyway, that's a whole other webinar. So I digress. So let's get back to the frames. I'm going to redraw that so it gets rid of the border. So let's get back to framing systems. So obviously I'm going to have to go a few minutes more because I kind of went off on a tangent. So the profiles are key to the program because that's the only way the program knows to draw an 1 3/4 system. So we're not really worried about the depth right now. It's how it knows whether there's a head can, or if there is a head can that needs to be drawn, it knows what profile to show for it. So all these things affect how the metal is going to be cut, obviously, and it also affects daylight, which is your glass sizes. So these are very important figures, and anything you put in here is directly impacting the cuts and the dimensions and everything on the drawing. So that's how we know we're setting things up correctly, is if all these profiles are input correctly. Now there is a glass stop tab down here, you can kind of see it at the bottom, that references these profiles. So if you try and add glass stops and there's no profiles in this window, the glass stops are going to just look like a line. So if you want them actually to have a reveal of, say, a ½ inch or quarter inch or whatever, the values would have to be entered into these boxes right here. And this is another new feature that we've added in the last 6 months, maybe last year, where if I want, anytime I use a certain framing system, let's just say it's this one, if I want this framing system to always use glass stops on every daylight opening, then I would check this box and I would make sure I've got all my glass stop profiles entered in right here. So this is something that we've added because there's certain fin systems and other systems that require glass stops all around every time that system is built. So you could create those systems, or I think there's a couple of smaller manufacturers that have already done that and they've used this feature so that you don't have to go in and add the glass stops to each daylight. Obviously, that would be a hassle. So automatically, it's just going to draw them in for you. So the glass sizes are going to be adjusted for the glass stops, and it's going to show them on the drawing, so you'll know that they're being used. Now, the other horizontals is something that probably not a lot of people know about. You can actually have up to 4 different kinds of horizontals. You've got your standard horizontal, and then 3 additional horizontals. So that means that you can actually have different profiles for each of the horizontals and different parts for each of the horizontals. So if there's a 4-inch mid-rail or something like that, or 4-inch, chair height horizontal or something you need to draw in, and it's done a lot, then you want to configure this as a 4-inch profile. And then when you get into the stock lengths tab, you have the fields for each of the part numbers for all these different horizontal types. So if you've got a curtain wall that alternates, 4-inch with 2-inch or something like that, you can vary where you're putting horizontal 2 and 1 and 3, etc. So you can tell it which horizontal to use where, and then you've got that that variety of horizontals in the elevation. So there's just 2 parts to it. There's the profile and the part numbers, and that's the same with any of these things. Whatever has a profile, it's also going to need a stock length part number. So that's how this whole thing works here. And then now add to daylight. So as I mentioned, the profiles are one of the factors in determining daylight openings. Obviously, your dimensions, the number of panels, and where the horizontals are, and doors and all that affect daylight openings. So you want your added daylight to be, true to the system you're using. So the manufacturer will always enter or give a standard value for added daylights, and I know a lot of customers like to tweak that because they like a little more bite, or they like a little less to make it easier to put glass in or whatever. So you can actually adjust that in this window right here, and it's basically just adding, in this case, 3/4 of an inch to the overall vertical width, or vertical height, and 3/4 of an inch to the vertical width. So it's very simple. You just adjust that number to 5/8 or ½ inch or whatever it needs to be, and anytime the program's going to calculate glass, it's going to look at the daylight opening, and then it's just going to add these values to that daylight opening size. So real simple to dial in the glass. If you've been frustrated with glass sizes ever, all you have to do is look at this area of the framing system window and make sure that the right added daylight's getting added. If the glass is coming out wrong otherwise, it's a daylight opening problem, which you can see on your drawing. So keep that in mind. Okay, the next big thing down there in this window is the frame characteristics, which are basically all the different cut methods, I guess. So if we want wall jambs to interrupt the head, if we want wall jambs to interrupt a sill can or a head can, then we check these different boxes. Now, we used to have another field up here back years ago, and the way it works now is any head, and I'm going to actually jump over to this other stock length tab, because anything in head material and sill material is always going to be interrupted. So there's no choice in this window to either interrupt a head or interrupt a sill, because any part number in these columns is going to be automatically interrupted by verticals. and jams for that matter. So the jams, I'm sorry, you have control over the jams. So you can have the head extend over the jam, or you can have the wall jam interrupt that head. So we left that in there. But the reason we did that is because down here, all the pieces in this section of the stock length window are actually continuous. So a head face cover, sill face cover, horizontal cover, and obviously head and sill receptors, those are all continuous. So if you need a CAN system, your continuous parts are always entered here, and any interrupted parts are going to be entered here. That's just the rule of thumb. So, and they should already be configured that way when the manufacturer sets it up. But if it's not, then this is where you would do it. So now you'll see this system has a subsill. It also has a check here in the box that says has a subsill. So without that check, it's not going to draw in the subsill. And an important thing here is, let's see, I'm going to have to close this window. So this system has a 1/8" subsill, and it's also doing something weird here. I'll show you in a second on the screen, but the add deduct for vertical mullions and jams. So that's something that's in addition to what the program's already doing based on the profiles. So with this 1/8" profile of the subsill, it knows, since subsills are not interrupted, it knows that the verticals are going to sit on top of the subsill. So that's making, based on your daylight opening or your opening size for the actual elevation, it's making the vertical an 1/8" shorter than the opening size because that subsill is sitting under it. Now, this value here is actually deducting another 1/8 of an inch from the verticals and jams. So the jams and the verticals sit on top of the subsill, as long as we don't have the door jams interrupt. So the door jams are going to interrupt subsill, but the verticals and wall jams are not going to interrupt the subsill. So wall jams are interrupting the sill here. So we'll see how that looks on the drawing in a second here. But so this is a wrong value, basically. This negative 0.125, negative 1/8 of an inch, it's telling it to subtract that from the verticals and jams. The problem is it's already subtracting that because it knows this is the profile for the subsill. So this is something that carried over from our old software, the version 14, because that was the only way the program knew to trim verticals if there was a subsill. So now that the program draws in the subsill, anything that's drawn is basically accounted for in dimensions in cuts. So it's knowing that's mostly true. So there's a couple exceptions, but in this case, that's definitely the case. So anytime there's a subsill and it's drawn on the screen, you can see it. The verticals are being adjusted for that. So we're going to take that out to fix that particular system. So if you notice something like that, a vertical's coming out too short or too long, this is one place to look. Another place is to know that you should see it on the drawing, but to know what's going on with the subsill or head cam values, because that affects the size of the cuts of verticals. So horizontals obviously is pretty straightforward. Horizontal is only affected by the profile and positioning of verticals and jams. So so let's look here. We're going to kind of analyze the drawing a little bit. So right here we know, and here's what another change we've made, and this shows up in the beta version, is you'll see right here that there's a little shortness on your verticals and jams. Let's see if our jams, yeah. So the verticals and jams are actually an 1/8 inch too short. So now the drawing is actually going to show you the result of that add deduct from the height of jams and verticals. So we know right away that something weird was going on. So the reason it's still showing it is because I haven't. Oh, well, here's a really important thing that everyone needs to know about framing systems. I was just looking at the master framing system. So let's go back into this. This is the master list of framing systems. I got to it from the main menu over here on the left. And you'll see that this is zeroed out. Before it was a negative 0.125. So I fixed it in my master framing system. The reason it's still showing up here is two. One, we haven't redrawn the elevation. Two, the framing system, once an elevation is created, a copy of the master framing system is made for that particular elevation. And that's why we have a separate link here that says ele frame system, and same thing down here, edit ele frame system. This is a way to get to the actual framing system that's been copied for this elevation. So it's not going to do me any good, and it's great that I changed the master, because from now on, any job I create will use that. But to fix this particular job, I need to either click this link or this one in the menu. So I'm going to click Edit ele frame sys. You'll notice that value is still there here because it was a separate copy already, and we've already created the elevation. So now to fix it, I'm going to go in here. Oops, I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to zero that out. So everything's the same. I didn't change anything else. But if I wanted to, I could make this, I thought that was, oh, this is a different framing system, actually. This is B2. I thought I was looking at B1. But yeah, so even if this is a different framing system, well, now I'm confusing everyone. All right, so let's go back here. So if I want, that was B1. So if I wanted B1 to, I think all of them have the wrong setting there for that add deduct. But anyway, let me get back to what I was thinking here. So we're going to fix it here, and we know that this is going to correct it for this elevation. Now, one thing that's not going to happen is it's not going to fix it in the master. So we'll go backwards and fix it in the master. A new thing that we have added, though, is this button here. This is in the beta, and it will be in the 15.2.3 will be the final release. Is an add to master. So let's say you've got a job with an elevation, and you've made a bunch of tweaks to it, and I'm in the elevation screen, and you've realized that certain things need to be fixed. You fixed it in the elevation level, so not the master level. I can add this framing system to the master list. So it's not fixing the exact same one it came from, it's actually creating a new one and calling it a copy. So let's say I fixed that. Now, since I fixed that, I'm going to click off that field just to make sure it's going to save it for me here. Actually, to save it, there's a message that it says you need to redraw your screen if you change something, so that's fine. Sometimes it won't redraw it by itself, and you'll know that it fixed it because now it shows it flush here. The verticals are flush with the head. All right. So before I copied it to the master, I wanted to make sure it saved it, so I got out and then got back in. So now, if everything's the way I wanted it, and I tweaked it, a certain way for this job, but I want to keep that configured system for later use, then I'm going to hit Add to Master. So basically, it gave you a little message that it's adding it to the master list. It says I need to redraw because it thinks something changed. But now let's go back to the master list of framing systems. What I should see is a copy right here. So I think it's trying to sort it alphabetically because it's sorted by favorites, but I think by default, you can do it by description. Yeah, it's going to be the same place. So all I would have to do is change the name. I can actually change the name here as well as when I edit the entire system. So now I'm working with the master again. And, I can make it whatever I want. And then notice how it's got this little pen over here. I like to click off of that to make sure that pen's gone, because when the pen is there, it's saying that you're changing or you're editing something. When it's clicked off of it, you know for sure it's been saved. All right, so that's how you would do that. So let's go back to the elevation frame. So now that basically took this elevation frame system. Let's say I made a bunch of changes to it. I've added different parts. I've changed profiles. I fixed my add deduct for verticals and jams. I created that, basically added it to the list of the master frames. So that's good. But now, if I keep doing something with this frame system, let's say I go back in and change it again, it's completely isolated. So it's not going to know to go in and update that one I copied. It's not going to know to update the one that it was originally generated from. So it's completely independent, and you just have to remember that anything you do to it is unique to this elevation, this frame system. So with that in mind, if you make changes to a certain frame system and you decide, okay, I need this frame system to be applied to the entire job now, then one of the things you can do is add it to the master like we did, and then go back to the job. If you get sick of that, just check the box and it won't show up anymore. But go back to the jobs window, and then under current job update utilities, I can say change to new frame system. So now I can say, okay, where's that one I copied? Because I need that to be applied. And remember, I'm in the jobs window, so this is going to get applied to every elevation in the job. So then I would select that frame system that I copied to master and hit select. And now it's basically saying, okay, this new system is being applied to the entire job. And if you've got 40 elevations, then obviously that's a key thing. You don't want to have to go through and, because the other option is you go to your elevations window, you edit the settings for this given elevation, and then you select a different frame. But the problem with that is you'd have to do it for each elevation. So you wouldn't want to have to do that for every elevation. Now here's something we need to look at. It shouldn't be showing a 0 for frame ID, so I'll fix that before the final release is done. And I'm going to edit drawing now. So there's a lot of different methods of utilizing the framing systems. The other method is, as soon as I create a new elevation, it's going to use, so I'll just call it second, it's going to use the same frame that it was using in the previous elevation. So any changes you made to that first elevation or the one that's prior to the one you're creating, I guess it would be the last elevation of the job because it kind of tacks them on at the end. It's going to take a copy of that framing system and make another discrete, unique copy for the new elevation that you're creating. So I would go hit OK now. I would, create my, I would create my panel layout and width and everything. So let's say it's 150 by 120. So, but the point is, I'm still using copy of a copy of. I'm still using the elevation, the frame system that I copied. So, but it basically took a copy of the previous elevation. So if I went back to the previous elevation and I changed it again, if I made this 3/4 added daylight, then you'll notice that it's going to affect, see if I don't want to see that message anymore, I can just check that box. If I want to see the change in the next elevation, it's only happening in this elevation. So I just changed the added daylight for this elevation. Now if I skip to the next elevation, edit the elevation framing system, you'll see it's still on the original setting. So that just helps clarify that whatever changes you make when you hit edit elevation frame system is only for that elevation. So, and again, there's a couple ways. So you can actually make the change, add it to the master, and then apply that master system or that new system to the entire job. Or you can just decide, all right, I might as well just go to the master framing system, make all the changes to it first, and then see, remember the master still has that negative value here. It still has this. So now if I want to make the changes to the master so that I know, one, it's going to be saved from now on, and two, I can now apply it to any job I've already created as well. It kind of satisfies all of the needs. So now that I've changed it in the master, I've made my daylight a little different, I've gotten rid of that add deduct, I can go back to jobs. I can say current job utilities, change to new frame system. I'm going to pick that frame 2, which is the one I've been modifying, select it. Now it's going to apply it to all elevations in the job. So now when we go and we just kind of reselect that job. Now when we go to the second elevation and edit the L frame sys, we should see the 0.75 and the 0 here. So those changes have been applied. So that is, I guess, in a nutshell, what we're looking at for this first tab of the framing systems. But there was obviously a little more to it that I threw in there, but the key thing here is the descriptions. You can mess with the descriptions so that it will change the order on the list if you're sorting it by description. Look for notes here from some manufacturers because it will tell you that certain clips aren't calculated or some hardware is missing or something like that because our software might not have had a place for it in a given situation. So check those notes. In this case, yeah, so here it says outside or inside blades, use DF450 frames. I think they're talking about door frames there. So again, some of these notes have been carried over from our old version. So when we update this catalog, this is a 2012, when it becomes a 2014 catalog, all these types of things are going to be gone over. The settings here, the notes, the web address for a link to their website, all that can be updated. So, but profiles are key to how the elevations are drawn. Added daylight's key to the size of your glass, and all these settings are key to how the metal's being cut, and that's what dictates how your optimization is done and obviously your eventual bottom line fabrication and everything. So again, you can see what's going on the drawing. I know that my adduct is working right because it's flush here on top. My verticals are getting cut the correct size because they're already showing that they're sitting on top of the subsill, which is an 1/8 inch. And I know my subsill is not getting interrupted, but I also know that my sill and head material is not getting interrupted, and so forth. So if a couple more things I just want to show real quick. So if I did want to change something like the head can, so that was a 0 value. Let's say I needed a, just for kicks, I'm going to make this a 2-inch head can, but I don't want any reveal from the filler material. So I want that to show up just flush. And so right away, when I put a value in the head can field, it checked the box that says has head can, because if you're going to put something there, then chances are you need it to draw it. So it is going to draw us a 2-inch head can, continuous, because head cans are always continuous, and it's going to have no reveal for the filler material. But remember the part number issue. If there's part numbers for head material, it's going to cut them, but since there's no reveal, it's just not going to show up. So those will show up on your cut list, on your parts list, and all that. Now, if I did want, obviously, a part number for a head can, I'm going to have to put it in here. So I can actually click in my little list here, and I can just type the word receptor. Oops. If I can type correctly here. So here's a head receptor. Let's just use that one. So we're going to insert that part. So those are the two issues. Remember, you have your part number and the profile. Now let's see if, so now I've got my continuous head can. So this is what I was talking about. This is a continuous piece. Those filler pieces, which are under the head material column, are still going to be cut. But my verticals in this case, so here's another thing to know. With can stick systems, the vertical, according to the drawing, is butting up to the head can. So this gets into another topic, really, but it's important to see here in this screen. So right now, if I zoom in, I see that this is more or less a butt joint. Now, theoretically, or if this was done correctly, this vertical should extend up into the head can. So this is actually a situation where you need to have an add to the verticals and jambs. So let's do that. Let's go into the edit the elevation frame system. And again, I'm not messing with the master. I'm not messing with other elevations. It's just this one. If I need that to extend up in an inch, or even 1.25 inches, I would need to add the value here, because right now the verticals are getting cut on top of the subsill and butting up to the head can. So in order to tell the program we need these verticals to extend into the head can, I have to add a value to this field. And so now I can hit OK. This is a case where I need to redraw because it's not showing them drawing up into there. So let's see here. There we go. So sometimes, like you saw, I even had to click redraw twice. A little quirky in that case, but that's just the way the program is, I'm afraid. So the reason we did this, I wanted to make the program show these verticals drawing up into the headcan, because before it was adding that whatever value you put in there, but it wasn't showing, so you really weren't completely sure that it was happening. So now you're sure because it's actually showing it extended into there. So technically this should show a dashed line just because it's underneath the headcan, but we need to work on that part of it. But for now, it's going to cut it correctly. It shows that it's extending in. Your headcan is still continuous. Your verticals are long enough to sit in there and not fall out, all that. So so basically, that is one last thing I wanted to show you, where that value is very important for adjusting your cut size and coming out with the correct design or installation for a certain type of system. So that's everything for this webinar, and there will be other webinars that cover the rest of the tabs because those have more detail as well, obviously, with all the parts and details and all that. So so if you have any questions, let me know, and you can raise your hand or you can type in a question there, and that pretty much concludes this webinar.